Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Kuf Yud Ches. Mציעא, we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and the Sunnah Batzoro Vashivya. Says the Mishnah of the bottom of Kuf Yud Zayin Amid Beis. The Mishnah in Kuf Yud Zayin Amid Beis. Achen Beis Habad. A similar thing we had yesterday when you have two people who shared one property. It was one building. One person owned upstairs, one downstairs. Rashi learned a simple example where a father died and left the whole building, and one son took the upper story, one took the lower story. Here, a similar case where one person, father died, let's say, and he left an area like a cave that had a Beis Habad, a oil press built into it, carved out of the stone, and on top of the cave there was a garden. And garden planting, whatever they planted. So chen Beis Habad shehu banui b'sela. The Beis Habad was built into the stone. Begina achas al gabav, and there was a field or an orchard on top of it. V'nifchas, and it broke through. In other words, the ceiling of the Beis Habad broke through. So now the balagina, the one who's using the garden upstairs, what is he supposed to do? If the person below, meaning in the Beis Habad, doesn't want to fix the roof of his Beis Habad, which is really the flooring of the garden, so Yoreh, the balagina, can go down to Zorei Lamata, and he can plant downstairs. He could use the area in the cave or in the Beis Habad to plant, because that has fell through Achiasa, Lebeis Achiasa, Lebeis Badakipin, until the person who owns downstairs, the brother who owns downstairs, can build an archway. In other words, to hold up the ceiling, build an archway to hold up the ground above that, so that the owner of the garden can plant. A similar thing to what we said with the upstairs and downstairs. If the downstairs guy does not want to build, we said then the upstairs guy can build and move downstairs. Then we had a shiloh. Okay, if he moves downstairs, does he have to pay for that rent or not? So Rav Yehuda says he's got to pay. Otherwise, it looks like ribbis. But the solution would be to build the whole building and then live downstairs. So he's not getting enough from it. That's what Rav Yehuda had said. But here we have a similar thing. The upstairs guy, in this case, the gardener, lost his garden effectively because the roof of the Beis Habad, which is below it, fell through. If he doesn't want to build up the roof, build up the arches, same thing will happen. I call this another case. Let's say you have a wall or a tree that fell into the wall belonged to one person, or a tree belonged to him, and it fell by accident, fell into Rosh Hashanah. Things were not that built that strong, or the tree wasn't rooted properly, and it fell. Basically, the damage potter l'sham, because it was an accident, not your fault. You don't have to pay. In other words, it wasn't your direct. Remember, we said adamui lolim. If you do damage personally, you're always a move, whether even while you're asleep, because adamui lolim, you're responsible. But for here, it was something that belonged to you that fell in. It wasn't your fault. It was an act of God. It fell into the street. You're potter. However, let's say Nassan Lozman Luckets. Let's say they saw that the wall was weak. People noticed that the city inspector came and saw that the wall of the tree was weak and it was about to fall down. And Nassan Lozman either to cut down, to cut the tree down, or to wreck the wall. In other words, to bring it down properly without doing any injury. The naflu, and then it fell after they warned him. If it's betochas man potter, if they gave him a certain amount of time, usually the amount of time we'll see that's 30 days. Give him 30 days. You got a warning. You got 30 days to build it, to take it down. It fell down within the 30 days. He didn't have a chance yet to take it down. Then he's potter. If it fell after the 30-day period, which then he's considered negligent because he should have taken it down within the 30 days. Another case, let's say my wall, Reuben had a wall, it was next to Shimon's field or Shimon's garden. Now what happened? Benafel, and the wall fell into Shimon's garden. Reuben's wall fell into Shimon's garden. B'amarlo, Panei Avanecha, right? And the owner of the garden, Shimon, said, okay, get rid of your rocks. Your rocks are in my garden. They're preventing me from planting properly. Ba'amarlo, and Reuben said to him, Reuben, the owner of the wall, whose stones are now in Shimon's garden, said, Higiocha, you can keep them. Keep them. You take them yourself. I don't want them. Ain't Shomalo. You can't force him to take it. You can't force me to accept the gift, to accept something. I don't have to listen to you. They don't think it means if I don't want to take them, I don't want to take them, right? Ain't konalo davar hefker matan. I don't want anything. Let's say Shimon agreed. He says, okay, I'll take the stones. Misha kibbel love. Let's say after he accepted the stones, Amar lo, Reuben, it looks like a ruse now. First, Reuben said to Shimon, take the rocks for yourself. Shimon says, I don't want them. He doesn't want them. Let's say Shimon says, okay, I'll take them. And he took them. Now Reuben says, I'll tell you what, I want my rocks back. I'll pay you for your expenses. I didn't want to, he didn't want to go hire somebody. Don't take your expenses. I'll take my rocks back. Ain't shomalo, you don't listen to him because, he's an Indian giver. You said take it, and I took it. Once I took it, you can't take it back. Okay, another case. And this is a similar case to the case of the Reuben's wall, the Reuben's rocks falling into Shimon's garden, where but here we're talking about, in this case, you have a worker, you have a boss and a worker. So as a boss hired a worker, to work with the straw and the stubble. The worker said, I'd like my paycheck. Can I have my paycheck? Take some of the straw and the stubble as your pay. I'm not going to give you cash. You can take some of the work, stuff you did with it, take that. And Shomli doesn't have to listen to him. He says, I'm entitled to my paycheck. I want shekels. I want green. Let's say he says, okay, I'll take the straw. I'll take that. And then the owner said, no, I'll tell you what, change my mind. I'll give you cash. Maybe he was just pushing him off till he got cash. He says, okay, takes the straw. And then he said afterwards, after he took it, he said, take your paycheck. I'll take my straw back. And you don't listen to him. This is similar to the case of the rocks falling in, except in the case of the rocks, it was two neighbors, right? It wasn't a worker and a boss. Here it's a worker and a boss. So now we're going to.
The guy's watering his field. He eroded the ceiling.
That's not what happened. It's if he eroded it with his thing, then he could say he did the damage. In this case, it just fell down. It just fell in. It's not like he caused it directly. Okay. Says the Gemara, Nifchasa. So what he said in the case, going back, like you said, the case with the base of Bad and the garden on top, Nifchasa, how much? How much did the whole thing have to fall through? Remember, we said before in the case of the house falling in, where he rented a house, in that case, of Bayis the Aliyah. In the case where there was a landlord and a tenant, and it fell in, right? So and the owner doesn't want to fix it. So the Baaliyah can come downstairs and live with him until he fixes it. That's what we said, right? We come inside. In other words, the Tanakhama said that the landlord is responsible to fix everything. And we said over there, well, how much of it had a break? How much had it break? The whole thing broke? How much? So Rav says, most of it. If most of it fell in, then most of it fell. Let's say the garden on top still has 50%. 50% of it is still intact. So he could plant upstairs 50%, and the other 50% he'll plant downstairs. So that apparently is okay. So Rav says, when does he have the right to come downstairs? If only most of it fell in. But if not most of it fell in, then he doesn't have the right to come. That's it. Shmuel Amar Ba'arba. It should be Ba'arba, because we're talking about Tfachim. If we had before, it's not Arba Amos. Arba is Amos. You don't need Arba Amos. It's Arba Tfachim, even a smaller amount. In other words, that's what Shmuel said by the Dira also, when the landlord and the tenant. Shmuel Ba'arba. Rav Baruba, most of it. You could do part of it and part of it. In other words, if it's only 4 Tfachim or even more, if it's not most of it, so you do part of it up and part of it. You don't move everything downstairs. But if most of it's gone upstairs, then you can move the whole operation can move downstairs. Shmuel Amar Ba'arba with 4 Tvachim. It's very inconvenient for a person to plant partially above, partially below. So even if only 4 Tvachim broke through, he's entitled to move the whole garden, his whole operation downstairs. Utsricha. Obviously, he'd have to displace the olives, etc. The base of Bat's got to be displaced too. This is Mitzricha. Why do we need both cases? We had the case before with the landlord and the tenant, where the wall, where the flooring fell through, and there we saw the same machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. When is the tenant allowed to move downstairs? Rav says only most of it broke through. Shmuel says even 4 Tvachim. Mitzricha. Maybe the Ishmael says, the person doesn't want to have to live partially upstairs, partially downstairs. That's my house. I want to live in one place. When it comes to planting, but in the case of the planting, in this case with the base of bod and the gina on top, you might say, okay, a person plants in different places. It's not as bothersome to plant here and plant there. You don't have to do it every day, up and down, up and down, up and down. You could pick, 1 week you plant downstairs, 1 week you plant upstairs, or go by days. Not as inconvenient as living in a house where you got to go partially upstairs, partially downstairs. Maybe in the case of the field, maybe it's motor to Rav, then unless most of it fell through, he's not entitled to move downstairs. But if you tell me the case of Zriya, where planting, so there Rav says it has to be most of it. But in the case of a house, maybe it's motor shmuel, all you need is 4 tvachim to give the tenant the right to move downstairs. Sricha, therefore, we have to tell me the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel is in both cases. The Rav says you can't move downstairs or move the garden downstairs unless most of it fell through, and Shmuel says 4 tvachim in both cases. Nasan lozman. So in the other case, in the second case, we said if you had a wall or a tree that fell into Rishus Rabbim, you're put. It's considered an accident, and it's not your fault. You didn't know that it was going to fall in. Maybe it's considered like the act of God. It's an accident. You're put. However, right? So it was an accident. What could he have done? However, if Bezdin or the authorities saw what was taking place, that it was weak and it's going to fall, and they told him to take it down, either cut the tree down or dismantle the wall, and he didn't take care of it in time, so then he's responsible. How much time they give him? 30 days. That's usually the amount of time given for these kind of fines. You have 30 days to correct the situation. Mishaya Koslo. Now, let's say your wall was next to somebody else's garden, we said, and your wall fell into the stones fell into the other guy's garden, and the other guy said, get rid of your stones, and he said, no, you keep them, I don't want them. So it says over there that you can't force him. However, once he took them, the guy can't claim them back. He said, since at the end we said what? We said, listen, take your expenses, and I'll take my rocks back. It's mashma that the owner, Shimon, the owner of the field, into whose field the rocks fell in, must have cleared them away already, because he said, I'll pay you for your expenses that you already incurred. So it's mashma they were already removed. So time at a panina, because he's moved them. Hello, panina. It's mashma if he didn't remove them, they were simply sitting in his yard. You don't say that, right? If he didn't move them, you don't say, I'll pay you. I'll pay you for it. Am I meticulous to that? Why do you say that? In other words, you're saying that look, once Shimon has removed the rocks, and then he says, I'll pay you for your expenses and I'll take my rocks back, right? You can't do that. Smash because he removed them already. He wouldn't say that. In other words, if he hadn't removed them, then apparently the owner of the rocks, the owner of the wall whose rocks fell in, would be able to claim them back. Am I? It's only because he said, once he moved them away, I want to give you your expenses. He doesn't have to listen to him. But Smash if he didn't remove them, he can't. Then the owner of the original owner of the rocks can take it back. Am I? Why does he have to remove them in order for this to be effective and say, no, I'm keeping the rocks now? Even if he didn't remove them, his sadeh should require them. Your field, your own chatzer, your own property acquires something for you, even without your knowledge. If you want it to be that way, so like that. That's he wants to call it. In other words, that's only your field can acquire something for you. You could say to yourself, anything that comes into my field, I want to acquire it. That's only when he wants to acquire it. But over here, that's only if the other guy wants to give it to him. Right? He wants to give it. But here he's trying to evade him. He doesn't really want to. I was thinking the Pashup shot is, I said, he wants it to acquire for him. But when it Lashon Laknuye sounds more like the owner of this rocks, the owner of the wall, wants to give it to him. He's just trying to get rid of him. He's just trying to evade him. Okay, you take the rocks, but really he wants to keep them, he wants to pay for them afterwards. I think there's two ways to learn the Gemara. You could say that your field only acquires for you the pashut is anyway. When you want your field to acquire something from you, but I think that lashon should have been leknuyele. He says la'aknuyele sounds like I'm being maknet to you. Yeah. So that's more sounds like the owner of the wall is saying. If the owner of the wall wants to give it to him, then your chassid's going to he doesn't really want to give him the rocks. He's just trying to evade him and says, okay, you take the rocks, but he didn't really want to give it to him. So therefore, once the owner of the field took the rocks, he said, look, take the rocks, you keep them. If he took them, he took them. So he gave it to me, I took them. But if he didn't take them yet, and they're just sitting there, then maybe the owner of the rocks didn't want to give it to him. Yeah. That's the question over here. Why shouldn't the field acquire it himself? So that only means when the other person wants to give it to him. Right, he doesn't want to give it to you. Yeah. My field can acquire something from me if I wanted to, even if I didn't know it fell in there. If the other person wants to give, like you say, a kid's ball, somebody threw a ball into your yard by mistake. You can't. It's not yours automatically. He doesn't want to give it to you, right? So yeah, the kinyan always works when I want to give you something. All the symbolic gestures that we do, whether it's hakbah, meshicha, chalipin, whatever the kinyan is, that's a symbolic kinyan based on the fact that the original owner of the item wants to transfer ownership to you. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Can you come over and say, oh, I saw your wallet. I just took your wallet. It's mine. No, you don't want to give it to me. You can't just take your wallet.
Well, this all depends on if it's asmachta is tanya or not.
No, I don't think there's a asmachta. No, I don't think so. It's not. Asmachta is if I don't do something, I'll give you if I don't win, I'll give you $1 million. Or if I don't get this, you can collect the whole thing that we saw yesterday. Here it wasn't a question. Here he just said, listen, you keep the rocks.
But I really don't need it.
Yeah, but it's not like that. If he said I keep the rocks, and if he took the rocks, there's no question. He took the rocks. He can't get them back. But over here, if he didn't take the rocks, they're just sitting there. It's mashma that he could get them back. Why? Why shouldn't the field be cornered for you? The answer is he didn't really want to give it to him. He said, take the rocks, but you didn't take the rocks. Right. I didn't, yeah. No,
I don't think it's a smacht. It's more like harama.
Pardon?
I don't think it's a smacht. It's more like harama. He's trying to fool him.
Yeah, he's trying to fool him. That's what he says. He's evading. That's all. A smacht is if this doesn't happen, I will pay. If I don't win, I'll pay you $1 million. It's always like something that's an exaggerated assurance. I assure you I'm going to do this if I don't do that. Here he said, keep the rocks. If he took the rocks, fine. If he didn't take the rocks, he said, you take them. But if he didn't take them, maybe he wouldn't acquire them. Why wouldn't the field acquire for him? Apparently, he's trying to evade him. When I first learned the Gemara, I thought it was like, it's only when you want your field to acquire it for you. But over here, Rabbi Yosef says your chutzner even without your knowledge, your chutzner can acquire it for you automatically. But if the other guy has to want to give it to you, though. Let's say this is a similar case with the wall falling into the rocks, except here it's a worker and a boss. Why do you need both cases? In both cases, the man said, you keep the rocks, right? Or you keep the tevin. So he doesn't have to force me. I don't want to take the tevin. I don't want to take the rocks. I don't force you. Why do I need both cases? When he said, you keep the rocks, well, we have no business up here. You don't owe me any money. I don't have to take the rocks. Why should I keep your rocks? I don't want your rocks. But over here, where the boss owes the wages to the worker. Remember, he said, I hire you to clear the stubble and the straw. And then he said, where's my paycheck? And he said, keep some stubble and straw as your pay. So you might think, you have to listen to him. The Armenian people, there's a common saying, from the person who owes you money, from your debtor, pari efra, take even brand. In other words, whatever he gives you, when you're trying to collect money from somebody, take whatever he has, because tomorrow he may not get anything. They're willing to pay you with lousy pennies or whatever. Take whatever it is. Take whatever. So maybe here too, He's saying, listen, the guy owes you money, he owes you a paycheck, and he's willing to give you brand. Take the brand, take something. So I might say, if he says that, maybe you got to listen to him. You don't. Over here, in this case with the worker, once you accepted the brand, and then the guy says, no, I'll pay you, and say, you know, listen to me, because he's got wages. I can accept the wage. I took this my wages. But over there, where he doesn't really owe him any money anyway. In the case of the wall, the brick, the rocks from the wall falling in, so he doesn't really owe him any money. So when he says, listen, I'll take my rocks back now, and you keep I'll pay you for your trouble, maybe you should listen to him because he doesn't really owe him the money. That in both cases, once he's accepted either the straw or accepted the rocks, and he's taken them, and now the original owner wants to take them back, you don't listen to him. Ain't shomelo. So this ain't shomelo we're speaking about on the worker. The worker who has take the straw and and keep it, and you don't have to listen to him. He says, you owe me money. I don't want to take this. You don't have to listen to him. I have a tanya shomelo. We learned in another brisa that you do listen to him. If the boss says keep the straw, you got to listen to him and you take that as your paycheck. So the brisa seems in contradiction to our Mishnah. Amar Rav Nachman, so we're going to look for different excuses, different ways to answer this. Amar Rav Nachman, lo kasha kamishlo chavero. If the worker was working for the boss's own property, so then he says, listen, you owe me cash, you owe me paycheck, I don't want to take this. But if he's working, the boss directed him to work in somebody else's field where the boss doesn't really own the straw, he's not really working for him, so he's not working directly for him. He's working for him, but he's working on somebody else's field. Then you could say, keep the straw. If he says, take the straw, that's good enough. I'm not paying you for my paycheck, keep the straw. What kind of an answer is that? What's the reason when he's working for the boss's own field? Why can the worker say, I'm not taking the straw, I want cash? My time, I got the paycheck. I'm expecting a pay. I don't want to get straw. I need cash. If the boss directs him to work in somebody else's field, the boss is responsible to pay him in cash. The time of Sofa Sapor, we had this before. Let's say the boss hires him to work in the boss's own field. By mistake, he directed him to somebody else's field. The boss is responsible to pay his paycheck because I hired you to pay to work over there. Afterwards, the boss who directed him to the wrong field can go to the owner of that field and say, listen, pay me because I already cleared your field, I harvested, I planted, whatever he did. But the point is that if the man hired him to work in a field, then he directed him to one field. It makes no difference if it's his field or somebody else's field. Either way, the boss has to pay him a paycheck. So either way, if our mission is correct, that he can't force him to take straw, why does the other brisa say, Shomelo, that you could force him to take the straw? If he was working in the boss's own field, the guy says, listen, I'm giving you straw, I don't want straw, I want to get a paycheck. But if it was working in Hefker, it didn't belong to the owner could say, it's not mine anyway, you can take whatever you want. Rashi says over here, B'shel Hefker, Shomelo. That's what, in case you think it's the other way. Hefker Shomelo, the Omerle, Kanibay At, I don't own it. In other words, you're working in somebody else's field anyway. You're working in the Hefker field. I directed you to work in a Hefker field, so take something from there as your paycheck. There you could do it. Kash asking that. When a worker finds something while he's working, like let's say he's doing something, you sent me on an errand to pick up your groceries. On the way, I found a diamond in the street. He can keep it. Amosai, when is that? When the owner said, Nacheshimo, weed for me hayom today, or adori minum, or hoe for me tiyom, dig for me. In other words, when he said that he had a specific task, like I said, going to the grocery store, or weeding, or digging, and not part of that task, he found some item, he found a diamond on his own, he can keep it. Work for me today. I'm hiring you from 9 to 5. All day you're working for me. Then Mציעא gets to keep it. So it makes no difference. What's the difference if it's he's working on the boss's own field, or he told him to work in a field that's hefker, and you're saying, well, he doesn't really own the items yet. Either way, he's working for the balabayas. So whatever he picks up belongs to the balabayas too. What's the difference if he's working the balabayas? You wanted to say by hefker it's different, because by hefker the owner doesn't own it anyway. So he could say, listen, take it. It's what do you want? You're working in a field that's hefker. It's not mine. Take it. Take whatever you want. Take it. Take your paycheck from there. What difference does it make? Either way, you're working for the balabais. When you pick it up, it's the balabais. So either way, it's the balabais' own straw. So what's the difference? Why in one Amish says ain't shamalon and you say shamalon? Is he picking up the stuff? If he picks up the stuff, you're right. He's picking up for the balabais. But if he hired him only to watch it, habata means to look, mabit to look, then he says it doesn't really belong to the balabais. So the balabais could say, you know what? Take your paycheck from there. Rash says, V'idi b'shel hefker. They're both hefker. In other words, the balabais hired him not to work in his own field, but to work in the hefker field. Amish is speaking about where he hired him to gather straw and stubble to pick it up. Right? He says, listen, you hired me. You're going to be paying me $5 an hour to pick up the stuff, and I picked it up for you. So you owe me $5. The Bryce is speaking with where he hired him simply to watch, guard it, or lahashlich melios, or just to throw it down to lek bagba. You go keep it. It's not mine. You go keep it. You work there, so take it from there. That's how we can. That's how difference in the mission of the Bryce. So that's how the Gemara answers it. But this question is habata behefker. If you're just looking something, guarding something hefker, not picking it up, are you kona or not? We're saying our Bryce holds that he's not kona. If I hired you to pick something up for me, then you picked it up for me, and then I owe you the wages. But if I just hired you to look, to guard something, it's not mine, I didn't pick it up yet, it still belongs to hefker, then I don't have to pay for my own paycheck. I can direct you and say, take some of that stuff for yourself. Amar Rabba, habata behefker, tonight, it's a machlokas. So Rabba wants to say that just checking or looking or guarding, so say guarding something in hefker, are you kona that way or not? Is a machlokas tanan. The tanan. Shamas fiche shvius notens farm mitumas halishra. The Beis Hamikdash hires workers. They to take during Shemitah. How do you get the first barley to bring the carbon omer, or the first wheat to bring the shtei lechem on Shavuos? And nobody's allowed to plant, so they take from the aftergrowth. Shomer sficha shvius. They Bezdin sends out, the Bezdin of the Beis Hamikdash sends out guards to guard the aftergrowth, like the wild growths of either barley or wheat, depending on which carbon it is. How do they get paid? No, they get paid from the temple treasury, the Trumas Alishka. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Yossi says they don't have to get paid. If he wants to, if a person wants to, he can donate his own time. I'd like to do a mitzvah, take part of the mitzvah. The Shomachim is a Shomachina. Amrulo. So they answered him. The Tanakama answered Rabbi Yossi. They told him, the Chacham answered him, Ata Omer Kain, you say that he should work for nothing. If that's the case, Ein Boam Mishal Tzibur. If that's the case, when he guards them, listen carefully, when this Shomer guards the barley out in the field and he's not being paid, comes out that it's his barley, and then the carbon's not brought from the carbon tzibur because it's brought from that individual guard. The individual guard is his barley. Therefore it's not a carbon tzibur. It's brought in properly. My la b'akamifki. L'chora, this is the machlok. Tanakama savar about the behefker koni. The Tanakama holds that just looking at something, you're kona. Therefore, Eov le'agra, if the Beis Hamikdash paid him a wage, ain't. So if he paid him a wage, in return for the wage, he hands over the barley, and therefore the barley now belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. It's the temple treasury. Lo. If you didn't pay him, belongs to him, because just by guarding the stuff, he's acquiring it. He's just guarding it. He acquires it. So if you don't pay him, he's giving his own barley. You can't have that the Friedman family donated this week's carbon, this year's carbon Omer, this year's Shtei Lechem. It doesn't work that way. But those who suffer no, he's not Kona. He's just guarding. He's not Kona. When the tzibur comes and takes the barley from the guard, now the tzibur is open it. Umata Omer. So what is it? If that's the case, what did the Chachamim tell Rav Yossi? This is what they told him. Midvarecha, since you say what? That the guard, that if you want, you can have a volunteer guard without being paid. Midvarenu, that we hold that the guard acquires it, that the guard can acquire it. So if that's, and he's a volunteer, comes out that it came from this individual's pocket and not from the tzibur. That's what they answered him. But we want to say what Rabbah wants to say over here is that according to the Tanakama, just being a guard, looking at something, keeping it in your eyesight, acquires it, and therefore you must pay the guard, or otherwise it's the guard's own barley or wheat which is being brought as a tzibur. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says no, but the Rafka is not kona. Amar Rabba answers Rabbah. It's Rebbe answered Rabbah. He says no. Amar Rabba lo. The kula amar about the Rafka kani. Everybody, even Rabbi Yossi, can hold. They're just guarding something you acquired. Here the concern is chashin and shemaliyim from yafa kamifti. The reason why the Chacham say you must pay the guard, whereas Rabbi Yossi says you don't have to pay the guard, is the concern is, yeah, he acquires it, but when he gives it to the Beis Hamikdash, he might not really be giving it, wholeheartedly, and it's really his own. You pay him. If you don't pay him, if you don't pay him, you're afraid he really won't give it to you, wholeheartedly, so that it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, but rather he'll give it. It's his own carbon. Rabbi Yossi Savar no, you don't have to be concerned about that. Yes, he acquires it. Indeed, he does acquire it, but when he gives it to the Beis Hamikdash, he gives it wholeheartedly. It's a donation, and therefore it comes from the tzibur. And what's the answer that they told him? What does that mean? What does it mean when they answered Rav Yossi? This is what they meant to him. From your words, where you say you can be a volunteer guard. According to us, the word the chashin and shemalim yafa, we're concerned if you don't pay him, maybe he won't give it properly. That's one way to learn. In other words, you don't have to say that it's machlokes tanam whether habat of hefker is a kona or not. That according to the Chacham, it is Kona, Yossi, it's not. Everybody can hold that it's Kona. The machlokas of here is, everybody holds that the guard acquires it. The question is, did he give it over properly? Some say the other way around. We're 2 lines from the bottom of the page, the wide lines, the Gemara. This is what he said. Everybody holds that just guarding it, you're not Kona. Here we're concerned that, the Bezin sends out because it's in Shvius. There's nobody planting, and there's not a lot of barley or wheat out there, and we're concerned that violent people will come and take it away. So the Tanakama holds that the king Rabbana basically the Rabbana made a takana, pay the guard. The violent people will hear, the Bezdin of the Beis Hamikdash sent out and is paying a hired guard to watch that stuff. For they won't grab the stuff away. Rabbi Yossi Savar, Lo Takinu, they didn't make such a takana. They didn't have to make such a takana. You're not worried about the Bali Yisrael. Then it was a machlok. Are you worried about Bali Yisrael or not? Everybody says that he's not kona. He's not. Well, if he's not kona, what's the concern about? According to you, the carbon will be bought from private funds. What do you mean? Everybody says that just guarding the stuff does not acquire it. So the guard doesn't own it. So Rabbi Yossi said, you're not takana. So what did the Chachamim tell Rabbi Yossi? This is what they tell him. Listen carefully the way Rashi explains this. Midvarecha, according to you, that say you can be a volunteer guard. Lidvareinu, according to us, that we're afraid that people will not, that violent people will come and take it away. And others' reason for paying him is not because to acquire it from him. He doesn't acquire, the guard doesn't acquire it anyway. But according to your words, that you don't have to pay him, according to us, that we're worried about that. And in other words, we say that you do have to pay him. Not that the carbon omer or the carbon shelechem will not come from tzibur, because they did come tzibur, but rather that the money that's owed, according to us, we say you have to pay the guard. You have to pay the guard, otherwise we're worried about violent people. You say no, the guard doesn't have to take money. Well, according to us, that we say that the Beis Hamikdash owes the guard money. If he doesn't take that money, right, that money is his money. And then when that money is used for other karbanos, then it will become from that. Not for the Omer and the Shtei Lechem, he doesn't own anyway. We're talking about that's money that's owed. In other words, the Beis Hamikdash has $4 over here, which belongs to Yankel. Yankel doesn't take the money, so if he doesn't take the money, that money that's used for a carbon will come out from a private carbon. So that's the problem. Rabin came, that's the machlokus over here in this case, whether you pay him or not. Take a look at Rashi. It explains there's Varena second line. There's Varena is fear Lord the king of Banabazusim and Truma, the Shamas Fichem. He's mochel, he doesn't want to take the money, but him solo, the Truma are Bazuzim. In the Truma, it's for money of his. She'ain at Sibur Chelik man. So right, Vim Koname and Tmidin Musufafim and Musafim. If you buy other karbanos and animals, Tmidin Musafim, Bashar Karbanos Sibur, ain't Tmidin Bal Mishal Sibur doesn't come from the Tzibur. And even though it does, he's mochel, and Farshim say he's mochel at the Hegdish, but it's got to come from the Tzibur. Can't come from the. In other words, the monies that are brought when you buy karbanos Sibur are coming from the cash, the Chatzi Shekel. It was given by everybody. If it was given, like for example, if the Beis Hamikdash would say, okay, we got some wood over here, but there was for the Beit HaKabayis, I'm going to sell the wood and bring karbanos from that. That's coming from Hegdish. It's not coming from the Tzibur, and here it's got to come from the Tzibur. That's the problem over here, the way Rashi learns this. Other Rishonim learn differently, but Rashi puts in that line. Hamotzi Zevel, another story. Hamotzi Zevel is just a rabbi. People would take their leaves and other kinds of growths to turn it into fertilizer. So Hamotzi Zevel is just a rabbi, or a regular fertilizer. Maybe they were they were taking animal excrement or whatever, and they put it in the Rosh Hashanah in preparation for laying it out in the fields. In other words, they took something from their house, from their garden, and they put it out in the Rosh Hashanah as a staging area. Sometimes you need to use Rosh Hashanah. People need to work sometimes. You go in the streets sometimes, and they've delivered some bricks. They're not going to stay there. They just put there, it's a staging area while they work. So Motzah Rosh Hashanah, Hamotzi, the one who takes it out is allowed to take it out, Mazav, and then the one who fertilizes, who uses it and turns it into, or uses it for fertilizes the field. That's okay. It's okay to take it out there as a staging area and use it. However, you don't soak clay or mortar, like cement in Rosh Hashanah. You don't do that because that takes a long time. It takes a long time, and that's mafriya the tzibur. Okay, so you do things which are just, very quickly. You leave it out there for a short period of time as a staging area, and then you can move it. That's okay, but you don't soak cement in Rosh Hashanah. Also, you don't form bricks. The way they formed bricks was they would have a mold, like in the street, cut out like a mold the size of a brick and put the stuff in there. Also, that takes a long time to dry. I will go into Bishus, but you're allowed to knead the cement in Rosh Hashanah, right? That's what you do. You got that tray, with the air, pour the stuff in and pour the water in. That you're allowed to do. But you shouldn't knead bricks. Also, you're allowed to do the mortar, but don't knead the bricks themselves. Not only shouldn't you form the bricks when leave them out to dry, but you shouldn't knead the bricks there either. Let's say you're building using the Rosh Hashanah. No, again, you're not really building Rosh Hashanah. Maybe again, you could bring stones to stage there, and then the builders will take the rocks from there. All that is mutter as long as you're not leaving it in there for a long period of time. Then hizik, despite the fact you're allowed to, hizik mashal mashal, however it does damage, you got to pay. You still cost it's still like what we say a bore Rosh Hashanah. Let's go back to the first parak of Baba Kama, right? You still made a bore there, Rosh Hashanah. It's not, the bore doesn't have to be literally a hole. It could be an obstacle. Shimon Gamliel disagrees, and he says you don't have to pay. You're allowed to set your stuff up there for 30 days. You have rights to put your stuff. You can prepare your stuff in Rosh Hashanah for up to 30 days with no penalty if somebody gets hurt. So our mission does not look like Rav Yehuda. Why? The time of Yehuda, in the time when, in the winter time, when people are allowed to take out their foliage and manure, whatever it was, compost, whatever, the time when you're allowed to. In other words, even Rav Yehuda would agree that in the summertime when it's not done, maybe you're not allowed to. But Rav Yehuda says in the time, in the winter time when it's done, a person can take out his Elosh Yisrael, but sober and pile it up for 30 days, so that it'll be trodden upon, it'll be worked on by people walking by, and by people and animals walking by. That was part of the conditions when Yeshua divided up Eretz Yisrael. He gave it to them, said you have to allow these things in order for the land to produce and for the economy to be productive. So you have to allow these things to happen. People can put their foliage, their compost, etc., out in Rosh Hashanah. If it's straight manure, I guess straight, animal excrement, then you don't need that. You don't need that process. But if it's other things that have to be turned into fertilizer, that's the deal. So what do you see over here? Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to. You can leave it out there for 30 days. Our Mishnah says if somebody is damaged by things that you left in Rosh Hashanah, you have to pay. First thing more is not feel temporary, but can go like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda's moda is she'im hizik, that if it did damage, you have to pay. Even Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to, but if it does damage, you have to pay. What do you mean? It's everybody says Vatan, what we learned in a Mishnah or Vatanya, or Vatan Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bener Chanukah, it's a Mishnah. Moda Rabbi Yehuda, Bener Chanukah, Shu Potter. In Rabbi Yehuda's moda, when it comes to Ner Chanukah, that can you put your Ner Chanukah in Rosh Hashanah? You're allowed to, right? Even if it doesn't, Neshu Osa Rishus, because he said with Rishus. My love Rishus best. And it doesn't mean once you do something with Rishus best, you don't have to pay. So what do you see with Rishus best? You don't have to pay. So how can you say Moda Rabbi Yehuda Shem Hizik Chayev? Rabbi Yehuda's mashma that he says if you do it with permission, you don't have to pay. He says you're patum shum shus. My love Rishus best is low. Rishus the mitzvah. It's Rishus of mitzvah. There you don't have to say it's Rishus of mitzvah to be even farsam because you leave your Rishus out. You leave the Ner Chanukah is a mitzvah for Sumei Nisa, so you're supposed to leave it out in Rosh Hashanah. That's different over there. There you're putter, but it could very well be that Rabbi Yehuda's moda that if it's not Ner Chanukah, you do have to pay. You're allowed to keep it out there, but still it can go like our Mishnah. You have to pay if it does damage. All the things that we said, you're allowed to put some sort of an obstacle in Rosh Hashanah. It means you have to pay. Rabbi Yehuda poter. Here clearly Rabbi Yehuda says all these things that you're allowed. The Tanakhama says if it does damage, you're chayiv to pay. Rabbi Yehuda says you're poter to pay. Rather it's clear, better to say Masis like Rabbi Yehuda. Mishnah doesn't like Rabbi Yehuda. When you say Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to, it doesn't mean as you say, you're allowed to, but it does damage. You're chayiv to pay. No, here Rabbi Yehuda says clearly you don't have to pay. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says you're allowed to do these things, but if it causes damage, you don't have to. Amar Abaye, now Abaye says, well, if you say our Mishnah doesn't go like Rabbi Yehuda, well, Rav Shimon Gamliel also said you don't have to pay. Amar Abaye, Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Shimon Gamliel, Rav Shimon. These three rabbis that we're going to say now, Rabbi Yehuda, that we just quoted, Rav Shimon Gamliel on our Mishnah, and Rav Shimon elsewhere. Kulas really all hold Komak Shasl Chacham Rishus, wherever the Chachamim gave you permission to put your stuff there. The Hizik and you did damage despite the fact that you had Rishus to put it there. You're putter. Whereas our Mishnah said, yeah, you have Rishus to leave it there, but be careful. If it does damage, you're going to have to pay. But these three rabbis say you're putter. Rabbi Yehuda, we just had Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said that you don't have to pay. You're putter from paying if you put a obstacle which is around. Shimon Gamliel, our Mishnah, Tanur Shimon Gamliel Omer, you can prepare your work there for 30 days in advance. Rab Shimon, the time was Rab Shimon Omer, we had a Gemara in, I guess it's above Makam, it's on side, I thought it's in Shabbos, but it's above Makam. Let's say you have an upper story and a lower story, and you can't put your stove within a few tfachim of the ceiling, whether you're below or whether you're above. He says, let's say you had the stove upstairs. So there's got to be a plaster on top of the ceiling of at least 3 tfachim. If it's a small stove, like you just put 2 pots on, not a big oven. If the first one is like an oven, if it's a small stove, you got to leave it tefach. Despite that, even if you left that space, then it's really negligence if you didn't leave the 3 tefachim or the tefach. But if you left it, it's okay. But still, if it did damage, you still have to pay. The whole point here is that if you left 3 tefachim or 1 tefach in the case of a small stove, you don't have to pay. So here you see Rav Shimon also holds that despite the fact that the rabbi said that's how much you should leave, if it did damage anywhere, the rabbis told you you're allowed to leave your stuff in the Shus Rabbim or whatever, like Shimon Gamliel or Rav Yehuda, then it does damage. You have to pay. He says you don't have to pay. That's the whole point of this year. Let's say you were excavating stones and rocks and bricks, etc. Bricks you make, but I mean the stones. Let's say you use. Who's responsible if it does damage? So he says like this: Hachatzav. That's like to quarry. The quarryman, the quarrier, masar l'satas. Let's say the man quarries it out of the mountain. He took the rock and he gave it to the chiseler. Once he gave it to the chiseler, and then let's say the chiseler dropped it or either dropped it and broke it or dropped it and caused damage, he's chayiv. It was in his hands. Let's say once the chiseler, his job is he gives it to the trucker, the hauler. He gave it to the chamar, like the guy who has the donkey, right? Achamar chayiv. And once he has it, the chamar is chayiv. Let's say the chamar gave it to the porter who takes it exactly to the building site. And gave it to the porter. Hakatev chayiv, he's chayiv. Once the porter gives it to the bricklayer, habanai chayiv. Right? The banai, the bricklayer gave it to the architect. That's what we call that. We call it today the architect. Here he says it's more like the foreman, the guy who makes sure that it's put in exactly. It's his job to make sure that it's done perfectly, that it's not askew. The brick is exactly, the stone is exactly in the right spot. Then adrichal is chayiv. Once you put it on the row of bricks and it's there and nobody's holding it now, the damage, they're all chayiv. The whole operation is chayiv. The last guy is chayiv. The last guy who left it there is chayiv. In this case, it would be the adrichal. Everybody else is part. It's lokash. If they're all hired workers, let's say they're working for one boss, but they each hired by the hour, by the day, by the week, whatever. So then the last guy who had it is chayiv. But if they're a joint operation where they took it upon themselves to build a wall, like it's one big company who built a wall, then they're all chayiv together. It's the job of everybody to make sure everything is done properly and they share in the responsibility. So if it was a schiras, each guy is hired. So the last guy who touched it is chayiv to pay. But if it was a kablan, then there was one big job, and everybody's responsible together. All right, we'll pick it up from here tomorrow. We'll finish the parak, finish the masechet, and we'll start Baba Basra. So bring a Baba Basra with you as well. Yeah, bring a Baba Basra. We'll try to do at least a mission. We'll see how far we get.